So now I'm going to introduce their keynote speaker, Bryson Bort, who is certainly the best dressed individual here for the event I've seen so far. So you'll see what I mean shortly. Bryson founded SCYTHE, which is a brilliant and cutting edge adversary emulation platform, and also Grim, which is a high-end boutique kind of security consulting company, amongst other things. So two great organizations where we have many stands work there. Bryson went to West Point as a graduate of West Point. He continued on at the University of Maryland, amongst other reputable institutions. He served as an officer in the US Army, helping protect our country, and couldn't be happier to bring up Bryson here for our keynote titled Get Offensive with Management. So Bryson is on his way up. Round of applause.
Intrepid explorers, you have braved COVID to join us here in person, which means that you have some requirements. One, you have to laugh at my jokes. That was a setup. You have to laugh at my jokes. Two, I like audience engagement. Now, the staff has already warned me, if you've seen my previous talks, I'm not allowed to leave the stage. So you're safe physically. However, I can see you and I know a lot of you. So I'm going to look for audience participation. So feel free to yell out when it comes to those moments, or you can heckle me during it. Either one works. For those of you watching online, I don't know how the questions get in. Hopefully we'll have time at the end to get to that, and we'll do that. So how to attack with MITRE ATT&CK to attack the attack tech. Don't talk back. That was the first idea I thought for a title for this. And then I thought, no, that's one. I mean, is there a talk anymore that doesn't reference MITRE ATT&CK? So we shouldn't put them in the front. So I thought your management has no idea what you do for a living, and we should take their parking spaces. This is one of the challenges. The inspiration I came up with for this talk is that I saw this problem where we go to these conferences. And this conference today is one of the exceptional ones that is jam-packed with speakers filled with awesome technical content. And we go to those conferences and we see new techniques and we see all these latest cutting edge neat stuff. And then we go back to our own workplaces and we don't get to do any of that, do we? Whose fault is that? It's our fault, somewhat. So let's get offensive with men. So now I have to get properly into uniform. Explorer Lieutenant Bryson Bort and Her Majesty's 3rd SCYTHE Regiment of Unicorneers at your service, fellow explorers. Okay. Oh, not to be confused with my cousin, Lord Cyberbottom, if you've seen him online. Okay. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Sean, when you think of an elephant, what do you think of? You think of a picture of an elephant? Literal. Qualities of an elephant. What do you think of when you think of an elephant? Massive. Jake, what do you think of when you think of an elephant? Elephant dung? Bear Grylls drinking the elephant dung. Okay, that's even more literal in a weird way. Henry Van Gotham, Sands executive extraordinaire. What do you think of when you think of an elephant? Big, right? So we're starting to get some characteristics other than our outlier, which no surprise, Jake Williams is an outlier. It's big. It's big. What do elephants do? They go where they want. They want to trample things. They trample things. If you want an elephant to go over there and you try to push it, is it going to go? No. Talked about audience engagement. Let's try that one again. You want an elephant to go over there and you try to push it, is it going to go? No, it's not. Well, guess what? The elephant is your boss. Jake, your boss is weird. So in every organization, there is the room, right? So we had the metaphor that we always talk about of the elephant in the room. And then there's the room where the decisions are made. And we as security often are not in that room. Now, how are decisions made in that room? Well, everywhere in the world, leadership is only done one way. Did you know that? PowerPoint. PowerPoint runs the world. You can't do leadership without PowerPoint, right? All of those important colors and shapes to capture your strategy that's going to say what we do. And of course, is how we do leadership. How do things actually get done in the trenches? Excel. Right? It always leads back to Excel. We have all these fancy tools, and at the end of the day, when you're an operator, Excel is what runs your life. That's the way it works. However, this is how the elephant sees themselves. Elephants don't think that they're large elephants and trampling things. They think they're cool and they think they're suave. The hierarchy of the herd. All right, let's give your manager some credit. Your manager probably is not the worst, okay? They're a high-powered, enthusiastic, intelligent nerd. Problem is the hierarchy of the herd. Where does your manager fit in that hierarchy? Foreshadowing, we're already starting at the bottom. That's security. Security supports information technology. No large modern business can exist without information technology. And business is run by the leadership. This relationship never changes. The relevance of this relationship is those are where the priorities form, which is where the budgets come from. Resources in people, time, money always follow these relationships. So what percentage of boards have a dedicated cybersecurity committee on them today? What? A? You think A? Anybody think it's not A? It's like the Price is Right. Well, I go with 11%. E. Why do you think E? You're an optimist. Timothy's an optimist. Do you actually think it's E? No, you just wanted to be funny. Yeah, it is in fact A. 9%. One thing I do want to call out here is, since my presentation will be available afterward with Sans, every single one of my slides has the primary sources available in it. So you can see the links down there at the bottom for everything. I do that for two reasons. One, there's only so much information you can cover in a talk. And so I like my talks to be able to allow you to go even further on your own. So they're kind of like a practical guide to go even further with that. And two, I think it's important to give credit. Okay, so what does the Serengeti look like? Let's define the jungle that we go off on our explorations. How many businesses are there in the United States? Throw out numbers. Guess what? It's greater than 1. I'll give you that one. How many businesses do you think there are? Yes. How many? A ton. All right. I quantify a ton more than a ton. 500,000. More than 500,000. 20 million. It's more than 20 million. 59. There are 32.5 million businesses in the United States. Okay, that's our playing field. Those are the legal organizations that are the constructs that we work with. So how many of them have security? All of them? Well, whether they know it, I mean, by definition, right? There's something, but this is their own self-reported perspective. Or are they investing in security? Or, you know, I just happen to have Windows XP and that's secure. I don't know, right? I turn my computer on, I turn it off at night. So this one I had to extrapolate, but I put the statistic where I got it from. So 13 million. So 40% of businesses self-report that they have security. How many of them have a red team? Now, let's start with the reason for this question, right? We are here at HackFest. Security is defined by the threat. There is no objective measure of security. Threats define whether our security works or doesn't work. And it's complicated because it's not as simple as I just stopped it. There's levels of where did I stop it or where did I see it? How quickly can I minimize that impact? And so the reason I asked this question of how many red teams are there is because that shows us the full level of potential investment for a place to say, that's the level I'm taking my measurement of my security or doesn't. Not just trusting the vendor. So how many red teams do you think there are? Internal red teams, right? There are independent red teams as well. So how many companies have their own red team? 500. Who said that? More than one. Well, 500 is a good number. What's that? 3,000. So it's about 1 to 2,000. Doesn't even fit on the presentation. Our Serengeti. This is the environment we are working in. This is our world. So the rules of the Serengeti. There are two kinds of village chiefs. I think everybody has heard the aphorism that there are two kinds of companies, those that have been hacked, those that don't know they've been hacked. Well, this is different. This comes down to leadership. There's two kinds of village chiefs, two kinds of leaders. Those that care about security, those that don't. And the ones that don't is where we have the challenge. Part of our responsibility to how do we educate and influence them so that they do care about security. Recognizing our earlier hierarchy of the herd, that we are one of only a few things they consider. So when we look at Maslow's hierarchy, the starting point for every business is literally the existence of the business itself. So if we walk that hierarchy backward, right? I have to be in business making money. I need IT to help me extend that business. Then security. I can't have it any other way. When we get to security, the existential starting point is compliance. Now, in our industry, a lot of the times we look down on compliance as like, that's not really security. And it's kind of true, right? It is the minimal checklist that is required for the business to operate from a security perspective. It's necessary. And then from there, we want to build off of that to get the management buy-in to do security. Because at the end of the day, security is, from their perspective, a cost center. It does not generate revenue. It can impact revenue generating activities, but it is not a revenue generator itself. It's a cost center. So convincing the elephant. All of us are very familiar with the managing down. There is a boss. Boss tells us what to do. But there's actually different kinds of management. You manage your boss too. You decide what kind of relationship you have with them. You decide what you share with them and how you share it. You're a part of that conversation. And here's the third kind of management, because you're not alone. You have peers. You have other folks that are on your side at your level that are part of that equation of how do I manage that boss? How do I manage that elephant? Outside of your immediate peers, there's this concept called the Security Champions Program. This is where, what if we got people outside of security to be a part of managing our challenges and what we're dealing with security? And we're going to talk about that in further detail later. Okay, so convincing the elephant. How do we convince this large, lumbering, dung-producing beast? Well, they're the elephant. So let's start with where they begin, how they speak. Do you know how to make trumpeting noises? You need to learn. What about their boss, right? Everybody's got a boss. How does their boss affect them? How did they get a win out of this? Okay, so lots of there. Like so many things, a speaker says some things and then it's like, well, how do you do it? How do you know how to do those things? How do you do them? Anybody? Ask. Isn't it incredible? You can just ask. Ask the elephant. What are you trying to do this quarter? What's going on from leadership? Knowing what their needs are just comes from asking them. Start the conversation by asking. This is going to surprise almost nobody, but people really like to talk about themselves a lot. All you have to do is ask and then listen. So what does your village do? So we've just learned how to talk to our elephant and what our elephant's understanding is. But what does your village do? You can walk the floor and find out. I used to work at an aerospace and defense company, and I built a global configuration management database from scratch. Took over 3 years internationally. And I was surprised how many people in the IT and security organization didn't really understand what those factories did. They just never thought to walk across the street essentially and go like, so what are we doing here? Why is that important? Because that's the language of the business that gives us that context. Did you know that that business, if it's public, is sharing this information filings, and they will tell you what their priorities are. That earlier slide where we talked about how many companies have a dedicated cybersecurity board, they will publish that and they will tell you. Not only will they tell you that, they'll show you where cybersecurity fits in their priorities of risks, because they have lots of risks, right? Climate change might be a risk. Supply chain disruption might be a risk. The pandemic impacting the workforce might be a risk. They'll publish where cybersecurity fits in that order of risk. The good news is moving up the list. A lot of places we weren't on the list a few years ago. Then we were sort of 4 or 5. Now on average, we're around 3. Do you know why we're now around 3? What is the biggest driver in the last 2 years? Ransomware. Because ransomware suddenly made cybersecurity very relevant to the business. Turns out there's a big difference between, oh yeah, somebody stole our data, to, my computer just turned to a paperweight. That impact. There are investor briefings. If you ever want to do that quarterly to yearly, you can listen to the CEO of that company have to sweat in front of a bunch of people answering all sorts of questions. That's always an interesting way to hear from the very top about what's happening in the village. There's news articles on it. And then hat tip to Mr. Malware Jake there in the back. He recommended that a lot of these places, think about it. The leadership has reading lists. Read these business books. Well, they're basically reading those business books to learn how to speak and do their own thing. You can read those too and understand how to speak elephant. So get the right equipment. This is the Cyber Defense Matrix by Sunil Yu. He released it at RSA a number of years ago. There's a website for it. The intent of this slide here is that we have our categories of different things in our enterprise, everything from devices, hardware, software, and the users, and then across the phases of what we can do in defense. What's the starting one? Identification. We have known since the 1980s that configuration management is the starting point for information security. It's 80% of it. Because what we don't know, we can't protect. Now, we usually like to just skip to the next one, which is protection, because asset management is a pain in the butt. The pain in the asset, I guess, if I'm going to be funny. That was kind of funny. All right, fair. Protection, right? Keep them out. Then we get into past protection is where initial access, a breach has occurred. That's when I go into detect, respond, and remediate. That is my defensive ability where I can control my ability to minimize the impact of a breach. So elephants are scared of fire. How do we create fire? So as an Army officer, I break everything down simplistically. There are all sorts of different models out there that show all the different phases of an attack chain. I think we can simplify it to 3 levels: reconnaissance, initial access, post-access. case the joint, I break in the joint, I steal stuff. Tying that into those phases, the greatest business value is in the post-access world. Reconnaissance, you're learning about me. Okay, you have a dossier somewhere. I don't like it, but you haven't really done anything to me with it. There's a potential access. You've popped me. I've got shell. I don't like that, but again, you still haven't done anything. I mean, maybe it could be a denial of service component, which is why there could be some potential business value. But it's the post-access world where an attacker drops that code and starts iterating through your environment to accomplish their goals. If they're ransomware, that's where they're breaking things. If it's a smash and grab, that's where they're stealing things, right? The greatest business is in that post-impact or post-access world. Okay, so elephants are scared of fire. So what is fire? It is expert, data-driven insights for risk analysis and mitigation. We're not just running around going like, hey, this is the coolest thing I want to do, boss, and I just want to launch it. No, we're trying to drive data insight with business context because that's what creates change. You don't run up to the boss and say, hey, can I just hack you? No. There's a particular service here that I'm concerned might be vulnerable to this kind of threat. Completely different story. Elephants don't respond to being whined at or told what to do. So, I don't know how to make fire. So many of these talks, they say like threat model, and then they like show all these complicated things. Threat modeling is not that hard if you want to start simplistically. MITRE, I guess that's the first call out since the first joke in the first slide, has on their webpage an entire list of all of the published threat groups. Tied to that in text is all of the industries that each of those groups are active in. You can simply text search off that page for your own industry, and it'll immediately highlight every single group that is a potential threat to you. You've now just been given realistic fire. Even better on the hyperlink, it'll go into a page where it'll show exactly all of the activities, like how those techniques and tactics work. So not only have we immediately created a real threat model based on real threat intelligence for free, quickly and easily, and they give us the plan on how to do it. So beyond that, we have this plan. We don't have to go it alone. There are other explorers, there are other zookeepers that we can do this with. One of the best ways to work with other elephants is a purple team. Who's heard of a purple team? Right? I mean, that's a SANS class. Who's done a purple team? I guess I should have flipped that around. Who hasn't done a purple team? Do you want to? Yeah? Why? Why do you want to? It'll give you valuable tools and insights? Is that on the slide? Because I feel like that's like, oh, insight, improvement, business alignment, right? A purple team-driven exercise. It's collaborative. We're going to do it together, right? I am red. I am creating the fire. You are blue, keeper of the village. How do we keep that fire from spreading? Let's work through that together then. So we're going to plan it together. We're going to go through that process. I have not seen a single purple team anywhere in the world where coming out of it, it was not just smiles and like, wow, that was great. Because the contrast is the old way, right? Here's your list of problems. Good luck. And then I come back in a year and we do the same thing again, right? What if instead we decided what those problems were together, which allows us to establish business context, and then we're going to fix them together. At the end of it, we fixed something. We did it together. We both learned different things. So often it's blue looking at, wow, I really like to see the insights of how red created that fire. But I'll tell you from the red perspective, we really, really like seeing the blue side. We love to understand like how you're doing incident response, How are you building out those detections? It's really interesting. You end up with an entire team that is better trained, that works together. So building a process. So here is the standard wheel of how to do a purple team. So we're going to be doing this together. So we've done our threat modeling. We picked the threat. First is come up with our model, which we did. We went to the MITRE attack page. We pulled down the threat that is relevant to our industry. We're going to analyze and organize the techniques, tactics, and procedures, which again are off of that page. Now we're going to do a tabletop. So we're going to sit down together and say, okay, so this is the list of all the things freely available. What should we do together? What's the scope of it? And we talk through that, and we talk through expectations. Hey, when I run this command, I expect to see this. Okay, and you negotiate those. Then you come up with the actual plan, and you conduct it. And this part is now iterative, right? We iterate between, I'm going to emulate the attack. I am doing this threat. Here's the technique. What happened? We didn't see it. Okay, engineering, run it again. That's the iterative part where we improve. Technique by technique by technique. That's the milestone-driven aspect. Okay, so threat intelligence. The DFIR report is a free resource that is out there. It provides, again, all of those details, go even further. Step 2, analyze and organize. What is our threat? Is there something we haven't tested before? Would testing this particular chain bring value to our business? We're not just doing this for the technical component. So here is a list from the DFIR report for Conti. And we see that initially it gets in with a fish, spear phishing attachment, and then it goes through all of its levels. Of course, PowerShell, right? Everything's PowerShell. Why is PowerShell so powerful? Because it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Why would I spend the time as an attacker coming up with all of my own code to do something that you're just going to give me the tools for? I'm going to use what you give me all day long. I'm going to live off the land, right? How easy is it to detect PowerShell? I mean, if I see a process creation of PowerShell.exe, that's probably a giveaway. That's the starting point. Let's take that away, and then we can start dealing with obfuscated PowerShell, unmanaged PowerShell. But the starting point, right, is just stop the basics. I no longer am surprised how often I see that the basics still out there, because PowerShell is everywhere and it's so powerful. It is a part of how the environment operates. So since this is a sophisticated crowd, instead of doing something basic, we're going to look at something a little bit more fun. So out in this particular latest version of Conti from the DFIR report, we see that they're using a tech, because I think most of the things on here are, we understand. Actually, I'm going to pull something else out. So Windows command shell. How often do we see a regular user in the command line interface? 0, right? Can they even find it? We don't expect them to. They don't really use it. It's not a core part of business. One of the most common standard commands at a command line interface for an attacker at the beginning is, who am I? Run who am I? What's that? See if they need to elevate, right? What level of privileges does this user have? Where am I? Attackers are not omniscient. That initial access is, I get a callback. I know the rough target that I'm at, but I don't actually know where that computer is in contrast to where I want to go. So I run who am I to start that. Now, going back to the original assertion, how often does a regular user get into the command line interface and run who am I themselves? It's an innocuous command. It doesn't do anything. It's already available there on that host. But the context of that, and then particularly when it's going to be followed by an attack chain of other actions is a giveaway. Very simple things that advance the level of our detection just light years right off the bat. Okay, so the tabletop discussion. Process hollowing is where I start a legitimate process, I unmap the memory, and then I load my code into that memory. Why would I want to do that? But yeah, make room for my own code, but why would I go through all of this effort to do that? What's that? Avoid detection, right? Because I'm in a legitimate process. Process monitoring is the basics for a detection. So again, the preface here is we're doing something more advanced. We're making more advanced fire. Process hollowing is allowing me as an attacker to obfuscate what I'm going to start to do because I'm going to be inside of a legitimate process. It's a process. Why? Because one of the biggest problems we have in defense is when we overwhelm ourselves with bad alerts, right? Has anybody ever worked in a SOC and you just get all of the bad alerts? What starts to happen? You ignore them. What's that? Alert fatigue, yeah. Oh, it's that again. Yep, it's that again. Yep. You know what? Just forget it. So I, as an attacker, am going to be inside to begin with. You would never want to have an alert generically on that legitimate process. Hence, more advanced fire with process hollowing. Oh, I do want to give a shout out because this is specifically from the SANS Core 699 Advanced Purple Teaming. Who wrote that, Stephen? Credit to Eric Van Buggenau. Did I pronounce it right? Close enough. Eric, if you're watching, good job. All right, so emulating ransomware. This is tricky, right? Ransomware is inherently destructive. I like to joke from a detection perspective that ransomware, you don't have to worry about detecting it. It kind of announces when it's there. Oh, my computer doesn't work. Oh, okay, right? Detection not necessary. We do, of course, want to detect the steps earlier before that happens, but it announces when it's in the environment. Now, the challenge with ransomware, since it's destructive, if we're working in a production environment, we don't want to encrypt actual production data. Not only will that upset our elephant, but the whole herd is probably going to be mad that we've affected their work, right? Kind of a starting point to testing in the environment. When we're creating fire, we don't want to set our village actually on fire. So how do we do that? Well, we can create dummy data and then use those same techniques for encryption on that dummy data. So I provide here two examples. One, we can write a script that just creates garbage because at the end of the day, we don't care since we're just encrypting it. But if we want to be able to, there's a website called mockaroo.com. It lets you go in and it'll automatically generate dummy data that looks like real data. It'll populate a bunch of random names, social security numbers, credit card numbers, whatever you want. The value of this is that we can be more advanced in terms of our detection capabilities, looking from a DLP perspective, looking from another idea that I can't remember at the moment. Oh, tying to risk appetite, right? This is a way to generate, making our elephants scared of what they have to do to get permission for you to exfiltrate real data, which could tie again to ransomware, like a double extortion scheme. Not only do they encrypt your stuff, but they exfiltrate it. Okay, living off the land binaries and scripts. So my good friend Olaf Hartong from Falcon Force, this isn't actually published. So I reached out to him. He published something back in February, and I asked him for what was the latest data that he'd seen. Now, going back to why living off the land binary is, this is our attacker's ability to look legitimate. I don't have to be stealthy if I'm just using what's already there. I don't have to do more work because the code is already there. Attackers are as lazy as we are. They want to do the bare minimum to accomplish their goals. And so what this chart represents is the last 7 months of public ransomware activity examples of what LULBAS they were using during those activities. So we have free threat intelligence on the more sophisticated techniques that we can use when we're making fire in our adversary plan. Okay, the best price for everything is free, right? Particularly when we're trying to convince management to do something, saying, hey, I need $50,000 to do it is probably a non-starter. Saying I need a few hours with a couple of folks, they're going to be open to a project like that. So the C2 Matrix is a collaborative, community-driven effort that George Orchias, myself, and Adam Mashinchi came up with from DerbyCon 2019. And the idea was there are all of these tools, commercial and free open source tools that are available to be able to do threat emulation. The hard part is which ones do what we want to do. And so what we did is we created a matrix that catalogs all the available ones. And then we have folks in the community actually conduct the reviews and categorize them. And so the value to you is that if you're looking at how do we create this fire and you need free tools, just go into our webpage and there's a decision matrix that allows you to put in what you're trying to do, and it'll automatically tell you exactly what tools can do that. Right there. Those are the ones that will do what you're trying to do. Going even further, in collaboration with SANS, we created a Linux distro called Slingshot. I don't even know how many C2s are on Slingshot in the latest version. Do you happen to know that, Stephen? It's a lot. So it is a distro that automatically includes all of these tools for free off of the SANS website. So there's a decision matrix with the C2 matrix to help you decide what tools will emulate what you're trying to do your attack plan. And there's a free distro from SANS that will automatically, because I think we've all experienced before that open source projects can sometimes be a little difficult to install and the documentation can vary. So we're solving that problem for you. Okay, so detection engineering, right? So we did that process hollowing technique that we talked about. Okay, I did include the link for it, right? So there are two tools here that I'm recommending for this particular detection engineering. The first one is called HoloFind. It's a volatility plugin that is specifically comparing the process environment block structure and the virtual address descriptor for those discrepancies. We have, in this case, a particular memory reference to start with, to look with it. And then another recommendation is memhunter, and that one I included the link. This is also taken from the 699 class. To be able to conduct, it's a host endpoint sensor, and memhunter lets you be able to refine memory hunting techniques and detections. Because one of the things that attackers do is it's easy to see them once they touch disk, but because memory is more volatile, a lot of them are trying to hide only in memory. And so here's two tools that we can use to be able to begin our detection engineering for finding them in memory. Detecting process injection. So who's heard of Sysmon? Who knew that Sysmon is now available on Linux? Yeah, not quite as functional as the Windows one. Sysmon is just an incredible tool for detection engineering. It is a device driver that is built by Microsoft, so we don't have the third-party problem where somebody else is building something and then our core operating system changes and it breaks. To go even further, folks like CyberWarDog, Roberto Rodriguez, and others, and I have some links to the GitHubs here, they went and mapped Sysmon event IDs through event IDs to the actual API calls. So in terms of being able to find process hollowing techniques, we have a number around different Sysmon event IDs tied to those API calls at the system level that we can begin to correlate for even incredibly advanced technique making fire. So working with other zookeepers, concept of a security champion. So these folks are not in security. They're probably not even in IT. What kind of value could we get if we had other explorers and zookeepers in our village who are from human resources, finance, business operations, production? If we had a champion in each of those places, one, they're able to communicate on our behalf because they speak to different animals, right? How do we get them to join our herd? Okay. They have different challenges than we do. How do we bring them together? Well, starts with engagement. Now, when I say engagement, it means two things we're not going to consider here. One, we're not mandatory telling them that they have to do this. Kind of hard to get a chain to it. The second part is we're not engaging them in our normal, here's your annual security training way, right? Go through this 30 minutes, don't click on the fish, good luck. The real world doesn't know that the movie Hackers is not what our lives are like. They think what we do is cool. Little do they know, right? But they want to be a part of that. Give them a chance to engage. See who seems interested when we engage them in those folks and recruit them. Now, the key to where everything goes sideways in life, you ever want to know what happiness or not happiness is expectation management. So set the expectations around what do you expect, and conversely, what they should expect from you. Make it worthwhile. This is kind of an extra duty for them. How can we incentivize them to want to be a happy part of our security champion program, advancing what we're doing in the herd? So how to make trumpeting noises, right? At the end of the day, we are celebrating with the elephants. So my recommendation for any starting point is consider what I call crown jewels analysis. And yes, I made that up. There are key business parts of the business. Start there. Don't try to eat the entire elephant. Pick a part that seems the most important and understand that. Gain control around that, right? The configuration management of that, the change process around that is locked down. Our protection, our visibility, what we're detection engineering and improving on. Let's start there and then expand out. As we do each one of these engagements, track it. Celebrate each win for both sides. Or show that improvement over time. This is starting to sound like right into the management reporting, which is how you get them to continue to fund and get where you want to go. Make sure you put the results in a context that the business cares about. Don't say device ID, this happened, nerd term. The server that holds our customer financial data was compromised. That would have been Conti ransomware, which means these are the business operations that would have been down for at least 40 backup plan. They get that. Speak in their language. So what do elephants love? Metrics. It's like water to them. I know it's difficult. It goes back and forth with the metaphors. Do I look like I'm a consistent individual? So metrics. So I propose this idea that I call the detection maturity model. The starting point, which we've seen in frameworks like Detect, begins with visibility. Just like with configuration management, I can't work with what I don't know is there. The same thing from a detection engineering perspective. It begins with visibility. What can I see? Then from what I can see, I start to build rules logic on top of that so that those events that I can see can come together to an alert. An alert is important because that's the first time I'm stepping from the technical realm of what the computer is doing to human involvement, where security steps in and begins the detection phase. From there, we've now built the ground of our detection engineering, and along the way from our engagements where we're focusing on what's important to the business and starting to put things in business contextual terms. Then we start to move to the advanced concept that was advocated by Dmitry Operovich when he was at CrowdStrike called 11060. Don't worry about the numbers. The key element here is we're now starting to look at that combination of people into how well does the tech see things to how well are policy and people trained or not, staffed properly or not, workload there or not, are able to actually begin to do detection, response, and remediation. That's the most advanced metric where it's not just what we can do technically, but it's putting the whole thing together to understanding actually where we stand. So going on an expedition together. There are lots of ways to do this. It can be any executive sponsored tabletop, which might be a 1 hour lunch and learn, to something longer like a 2 or 4 hours. An idea that I came up with is a choose your own adventure. Why not write a story where you're going to be able to lead a group of non-technical folks through it together? The advantage of a choose your own adventure is the technical decisions are already made. They don't have to understand them so much as be like, okay, well, I'm going to inspect the sim. I don't even know what a sim is. What is a sim? And now you have that conversation and you talk about the results of that. And then this concept I call purple team does not have to be only red and blue teams. Why not bring in those security champions from other organizations? Why not bring in folks from other business areas? Again, their view of the world is limited by Hollywood. They're going to enjoy getting a chance to see it on their own assets of that attack and defend. It's fun to them. So in closing out here, right? At the end of the day, we're always fighting for the jungle for more money and resources. So don't listen only once. Asking is not a one-time thing. Continue testing. As you have done a purple team exercise to achieve a certain level of improvement and engagement from your management and your enterprise, make sure that it doesn't fall back. Security is a constant fight against gravity. We have to make sure that we are where we thought we were because things continue to change. Add network level detection. Don't just focus on host level activities. As you mature, increase the sophistication level to things like process hollowing, which we talked about today. Leverage free adversary emulation plans, which are out there, and make sure that you're using all of this in metrics. So the inspiration for this talk came from a book that I read back in 2007 and 2008 when I worked for a particularly trying elephant. It's called Throwing the Elephant. Thank you.